So we can start the interview.
Hey, aloha, Sparky. So, please introduce yourself, your age, what island you're located on.
Sparky Rodrigues, 75 pretty soon. Oahu.
Okay, and then can you describe for us what you do as an activist?
I guess the main thing is showing up at important events, activities, meetings, and asking hard questions.
You think your presence matters?
Yeah.
And do you think that has anything to do with age or with your activities in the past?
I didn't realize that being present was important, but I found out that participating in the process is really important because others would make decisions that didn't fit with what I wanted or what I thought was right or appropriate for a community.
So, in a sense, are you modeling for younger people?
I didn't look at it that way. I was looking at me making sure that they heard a different perspective.
So, how long have you been involved in the political activism that you do?
I was thinking about that the other day, and I was expelled from school from bad grades at fourth grade. And my thing back then is I asked the priest about God. And the only thing you could tell a fourth grader was, you just got to believe. And it wasn't enough for me. But I said, if this is the expert who's telling me about God and he cannot answer my question, then all those that represent or as part of his thing, the nuns, the teachers, I figure, well, they have no clue either. So I just stopped learning. I quit mentally being present. And that was it. So fourth grade, I started resisting authority and whatever they were saying. Not consciously, it was just something I needed to say. And it was kind of the foundation, I think, for me.
So, you start in elementary school,
Yeah.
and then you move on to middle school and high school. Are you still in that frame of mind?
No, I was really shy, wallflower. My resistance was learning to swim and learning to dive. So a friend that I met when I went across the street from St. Patrick's to Aliolani, met a friend that was, because they wouldn't let me go to the next grade, so I had to do a summer class. So we met there, and we lived fairly close to each other. And from that point on, we learned how to go diving. And because I wasn't a swimmer, my parents wouldn't let me go to the beach alone. So I always kind of stretched the truth. I'm going to go with my friend. And their parents coming.
So, did you realize at the time that going swimming or being in the water was also a cultural practice?
No, because growing up, my grandmother, who spoke fluent Hawaiian, refused to allow us to listen they wouldn't teach us. They said, get out of the house, go away. And her friend would be in the kitchen talking Hawaiian, laughing up a storm. And we wanted to know what was going on, but they got really angry if we got within earshot.
Any idea what that was about?
What I realize now is that when you attend an American standard school, you got to be American. And growing up, so I was Cub Scout, Boy Scout, Explorer. So being that good American and learning how to pledge allegiance to the flag was part of that indoctrination, I guess. And back then, I was embarrassed being Hawaiian. So I had a lot of Hawaiian friends, but I was also shy being associated because of that stigma. And it wasn't spoken, but with my grandmother, Hawaiian, and my mom didn't know, she didn't share. So it's just a matter of the environment I was in.
You grew up in Palolo.
Palolo, 10th
So,
Avenue.
so tell us a little bit about Palolo, as opposed to, what about Palolo in that area?
Well, back then, the friends that I had, we would hike all the way up to the water reserve, which was the Waimanu side, and we'd go all the way to Ka'al Crater. But we'd go up with no food, nothing, no water, and come back with, I'd fill up my t-shirt full of guava, mango, mountain apple, sometimes avocado. But the Aina provided. I had no idea. I mean, for us, it was a playground.
I asked that question because Palolo is a site, a former site, military bases were in Palolo, and also the housing projects.
Yeah.
Which is why, I guess people are influenced by where they grow up, and I was wondering if that influenced you growing up in proximity to housing project.
Well, growing up Catholic, you have a godfather, godmother, so they lived in Palolo housing. I didn't know about the social separation, stuff like that. Because I was really shy, I didn't really get to know them, but they were part of the family and relatives and stuff like that.
So was your family predominantly fair-skinned?
I had uncles and aunties who were dark-skinned. My younger sister, both of them have olive skin. One of them has really curly hair and dark hair, dark eyes. My sister, the one just below me, and I, light skin, light eyes, light hair.
Was that problematic?
Not for me. I mean, that's part of the oppressive society, so we were accepted. I don't know if that same extended to them.
So how do you come about then becoming involved actively in the political scene? What happened? What triggered that?
I guess Mokua is the start, because Leandra and I mean, my wife, and well, let me back up a little. My first wife, Kathy, back then my cousin and I, we just got back from Vietnam, so we spent a lot of time together before we were both married. So he was a haumana of Sam Lono, and Sam scared the shit out of me, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. So we'd go to his place in Haiku, and you gotta get past the guard shack, then you gotta find parking, then you gotta walk down the ravine to the house and past all his animals. And if you came with bad intention, the animals would stop you. I mean, that's kind of what happened in the past. I never had that problem. So his other haumana didn't really like me because whenever they went, they were always stopped, either by the donkey or the chickens or the dogs or stuff like that. And every time I went to listen to him, I always took questions in my head. Never asked him, but he answered every one of them. And back then, as I started hearing some of the stories that he would challenge the state, the city, the Marine Corps about accessing some of the sites that have been destroyed, and getting arrested and standing ground, back then I would never have done that. I mean, that scared the shit out of me.
Was he kind of a model for you?
Of resistance, somebody that was able to be strong in his belief, because he was a Protestant pastor was it Kamakapili? Was it Kamakapili? Yeah. The one by the fish store. And that was the Lono group. And he ended up resisting that and studying more about the Hawaiian culture. So for him, he was raised by his grandparents. And back then, the grandparents had a kia'i that would take care of him. And back then, growing up, his feet never touched the ground because they treated him special so that he would end up learning to be different and accepting that. So he had always beat up this guy, which was a huge Hawaiian guy, and always pound on him and stuff like that because he wanted to be able to run around, but he was not allowed to do that. So he's learning how to be a kahuna was part of that training. So having to go ahead with that kind of life investment and overcoming your own desires to do something and not being able to do that, I think was sort of the modeling and understanding. I didn't know at the time, but reflecting back, being courageous enough to stand your ground, and more than that, being able to face your fear. And I don't know if he had any fear, but I got plenty. So.
But you can fast forward then from interactions and learning from Sam Lono to Makua, because that's where you were heading toward. Makua.
Yeah.
How did your interaction with him influence what you were doing at Makua? And what were you doing at Makua?
Well, Leandra and I had separated. She moved to Makua. I was here with the kids, taking care of the kids. And our relationship was really struggling. She needed to heal. I needed to heal. I needed to also protect the family. So it took a while, but it was a place where she started understanding the Aina and started working and talking to the Aina about healing herself. And then after some time of us dealing with all the heartache and for guys, emotion sucks. I didn't know how to deal with emotions. And it was really, really hard time. But I found that Makua, specifically Kahana Haiki, was a place where we would be able to emote, share stories, learn from ourselves. So it was a healing place by exposing all of these emotions, feelings that I was not used to. And it was also a place where she was able to go through the same thing. And during that time, I was also drawn into the homeless community who had started organizing. And the organizing part was that they didn't want to get evicted. And during that time, I became part of the governor's task force for homelessness.
What year are we talking?
Oh, I don't know, the mid-90s, I think, before the eviction.
Okay.
And we also set up Makua Council. This is of all the members of the homeless community there. And I became the media or media, because we'd have a meeting in the night, and then I would come back, write up a press release. And back then it was fax. So I would fax to all of the news outlets and stuff like that. And over time, that's kind of what I was doing. It was just a matter of communication. And this is where I'm going to kind of jump around, I'm guessing. There was one time a cop drove by and told Leandra, tomorrow you guys going to get a sweep from SWAT. They're going to be sweeping for guns and drugs. So that night after our meeting, I sent out a press release to all the media. The media called the cops and said, we want to do a ride-along. And they said, what ride-along? Well, you guys are going to sweep Makua tomorrow for guns and drugs. We want to be there. And they said, where'd you hear that from? Where's your info? Well, we got a press release from Sparky. And a year after the evictions, I found out there was a Sparky Connie who was with DLNR. And he was in all these strategy meetings and what was going to happen with police, sheriffs, DLNR. I mean, all these guys were strategizing together. And from that point on, they excluded him from all the meetings because they thought he was squealing. I didn't know I had made that kind of inroads because a lot of stuff we were doing was speculation based on what would be possible for these guys to do. And we were afraid that SWAT was going to come in with their instigators, plant drugs and guns, and blame it on us. So anyway, SWAT did show up at Makua, the military base, but they never did anything. They just parked and talked story.
You had talked earlier about Leandra and you both on a kind of a healing journey in Makua, but were you talking about Makua behind the fence?
We were outside the fence.
So this is the early interactions of Makua, the whole Ahopua.
Yeah, and we were on the Kahanaiki
side,
which is the Kaena side of what we call Makua. And I found that even today, there's a lot of anger and emotional testing on that side. Sometimes there's fights and stuff going on there. And we also found that Makua was a more nurturing side. So once we moved out of Kahanaiki, where all of the emotion, the struggles, and the learning took place, and once we got to Makua, that's when it changed. So the Ahopua of Makua, Ahopua of Kahanaiki. So one was learning, and it also had the Heiau Ukanipo. And a lot of times in the past, people said there was a Luakini Heiau, which is sacrificial. And my thoughts was, if Haulis came in or missionaries came in and they see the kahuna preparing a body for a burial, they would think a body on the heiau was a sacrifice and not part of the funerary process, because we didn't have mortuaries, we didn't have graveyards. It was a different strategy and a different process for death and how we process death. So looking at how that confusion is easy to be made and how words would be manipulating the thought and the process and creating fear in the community. So during the eviction process, we caught SEAL teams going through some of the halis to get across to Makua. And that was like 3 or 4 times they caught the SEALs coming out of the ocean and crossing.
Navy SEALs.
Navy SEALs.
Okay.
And then we also caught above one of the entrances, tall grass, we found this huge flat area. And during that time, the governor said there's 10 or 12 Vietnam vets that are prone to violence as part of this group out there. Again, to create this fear and to justify bringing in hardcore enforcement because of the potential threat. We got to go in prepared. Anyway, there was a place where they could hide and observe all the cars that were going in and out. And we had pastors and reverends and all kind, peace activists, many of them Vietnam vets. I mean, I'm a Vietnam vet, so me being there with my car, they knew. But they just painted every one of us as violent. So it created this potential for extreme enforcement. That means somebody would get hurt. So during that time, we also connected with the head of the sheriffs, Capi Cominos, the head of DLNR, which I forget his first name, but he was a Muniz. And we talked to him about arrest. We don't want anybody to get hurt. So what does that mean? You're going to come in and arrest us. And then we met with Mike Wilson, who is the head of DLNR. He's a Supreme Court judge now. And we asked him, what would we be charged with during the arrest? And he said, I don't know, peacetime for treason. I forget, there was a word for it. And that's what he said we would be arrested for. And that is huge kind of punishment, expectation of jail time, all that stuff. And when we were finally arrested, going to court, we were charged with interfering with a government operation. And then from that on, we ended up having a court strategy by having pickets show up. We would protest the extreme measures and the denial of access. So Leandra and I, our thing was accessing the beach as a healing place, Hawaiian resources. For us, the healing part was part of that Hawaiian resource, being close to the water. The governor kept saying, it's not fair for these homeless people to be on the beach enjoying the sun and surf every day while you got to face traffic and go work. So a constant, and even media, they were using video and then doing a soundbite and inserting stuff like that. And it created this animosity in the community that made homelessness and the situation that was going through really almost combative in a way. But the community didn't feel any support for the homeless. And they didn't do video when the wind and rain was blowing horizontal and the tents were all blown over and everything was soaking wet. Or when the fire burnt through and it burnt all the tents and it burnt, through the homes of these Hawaiians. And about 90% of them were Hawaiian. Several of them were vets. But there was no... like I said, I was part of the governor's task force. Charlie Taguchi was the chair of that group. So I had a chance to meet with agency heads, directors, and stuff like that. And their attitude was just call the cops and bulldoze their place. And then when we came up with the suggestion, because they were complaining about sanitation, where are they putting their poop? So we suggested bring in Lua. And I said, when the guy head of the DLNR was saying, well, we'll put one Lua at the cave and let these guys stand in line in the morning. I mean, that was the kind of attitude that they had. How do you create this pilau environment that you now can act at? And then we would always be after the park guy to come pick up the trash because we would put them all in one place. And they said, no, that's not my job. So he would drive by the piles of trash, and a lot of the homeless had no transportation, so a lot of them would be on bikes. So the cleanup also included all these haole visitors that would come down, leave their opala, and leave. So putting all the trash together, sometimes big piles, and then some of it had food and scraps and stuff, so the mongoose, the cats, the wild dogs would come in and tear them up, then it would be all over the place. And of course, it was blame on the homeless. And then guys would also go there and dump roofing materials, old stoves, washing machines, refrigerators, cars, dogs. And of course, the homeless was blamed for all the rubbish. You need a long extension cord to get any of those things to work. So it wasn't from the homeless, we call them urbanites. People from the urban core would come and dump their opala in Makua because they could. So, all these little things. You got animals, you got dogs, mongoose, cats that are dumped. And then they're looking for food and the homeless would feed them. And then pretty soon you'd end up with 20 or 30 dogs and they become wild and unsafe. And that's kind of the impression that government was leaving. This is how the homeless are. They get too many together and they become wild. And as we grew close to the evictions, the military, we found out that they were kind of behind it. So we were invited to go to Camp Smith. So we went into this big arena room and colonels were sitting on the outside along with captains and stuff like that. We were on the main table. The the paper, OHA, they were there on the outside. The governor was invited, and he was sitting outside as well. He was not on the table. So he was pissed because he didn't have the same level of respect as the homeless did because we were invited. And we talked about how important Makua was for the rehabilitation of all of the spawning environment, the fish, the seaweed, those kinds of things. So they listened. What was interesting when I went there, they have the American flag, the Admiralty flag, with all of their campaign ribbons. And some of them I've seen goes back to like 1700. So all these campaign ribbons, and I was looking, I wasn't brave enough to go looking through each one to see if I could find the overthrow, because that was part of the Admiralty's campaign. But when I went to the Lua, had one of their, I call them spooks, follow me in to make sure that I was really peeing and not planting bombs or stuff. I don't know. But they accompanied me both there and back. I just thought it was interesting how they ended up approaching our visit from homeless to Camp Smith. And it was a 3-star general or admiral or 4, I don't know. It was a very high ranking. And we realized that we already had a dossier or a file on all of us because of their observation space that they were watching and checking us out, and we were their enemy. So that's kind of how all of these things happen. And it was about, for me, it was healing the family. And then all these other things are being thrown at us, and unintentional exposure, I guess. And then what would be my response? These guys are inhibiting our access to Hawaiian resources. And a lot of the homeless went to Makua to heal. Actually, they went there to die. But being on the beach, they got healthier, they got stronger, they started healing. Not only mentally, physically, emotionally. And there's even sections of the homeless that was there. I mean, these guys were crazy. Mentally unstable. I mean, middle of the night, they'd be screaming and yelling at the moon and stuff like that. But there was a place for them. They were not excluded, they were included. And they were supported in their health, whatever that was for them. I call them crazy because that behavior is not the norm, but it was normal for them. And we allowed a place for them to be. The governor's committee didn't allow any place. In all of the stuff, part of the goal they had was to get the homeless into housing. And they offered housing to many people. In fact, to Leandra and I, they offered us property on the Big Island. We could go there. They would give us land. Or Kauai, any place but Makua. And even some of the cops were saying, you guys can be any place but here. So, I mean, that don't make sense. If we go someplace else, you're going to be there too. Say, well, that's not right now. So government's attitude was that, and even back then, Cayetano said, all the beaches got to be cleared. Not healed. There's no place to go. And even they came up with a list of all the service providers. We would call them. Sorry, we don't have room. There's a 2-3 year wait. There's no money in our budget. So none of the service providers that were suggested by the state had anything that could really help long term. There was all kind of excuses, smoke and mirrors kind of excuses to entice the public to behave a certain way. So during that time, the Makua Council, one of the goals was to go out and do a community survey. So they went door to door and they surveyed everybody. The first time they went out, 9 out of 10 people, you guys are bums, get a job, get the hell off the beach. Very antagonistic. A year later, because we were doing media, we were doing Olelo, doing the press releases, and there was a guy, Henry Po'oa, who would come down and videotape and then put the whole thing on Olelo. So we're developing a media strategy to humanize the situation of the people that were there, having them tell the story. So overcoming the fear of being on camera and microphone was, I think, one of the more success stories that came out of Makua in our efforts to change the thinking. So a year after we did our first survey, went back out, did a survey again, and 9 out of 10 people said, you guys are right on, keep doing what you're doing.
That was kind of where I was going to go, asking you, what do you think the impact of your activism was on the community? And I never really thought about the impact of how people look at homelessness and how that changed.
Well, even the neighborhood board, because we took different groups. We went to our legislators. We went to the Democratic Party. We went to the neighborhood board, and we went to Hawaiian groups. And one of the insults I got from a Hawaiian group when we said we wanted to come and talk about the situation, see if you can help, they said, make sure you guys wear pants and shoes. This is kind of the high makimuk Hawaiians. They're still around. There's that attitude, because when we invited OHA candidates to come down, they came with their high-priced shoes, their silk clothes, and their trimmed haircut. I mean, manicured nails, and they said, "Vote for me." So anyway, that kind of elitist attitude was really, it's part of our government, it's part of our governance. And when you have a home and you have money, you don't relate to poverty or the inability to try and survive. It becomes a real negative. And the more you can get people out of your eyesight, the less you think that it's going to be a problem for you. Because back then we were living on a paycheck away from homelessness. And like I said, I started doing video, learning about doing my own media, not only from Henry Poa, but back then when I started doing video with Olelo, our money was so tight, it was buy gas, buy film, or buy food. We had to make those kinds of decisions. So the family paid a big price. And I'm talking about my daughters, because Deandra was still on the beach. And she was surviving, she was making her own way. But as I have found that the media was manipulating the message by creating this illusion or delusion of violence and bad citizens for being homeless, because all they got to do is get a job, and that changes everything. So when I was on the committee with the governor, I said, okay, what we need is car repair. We need insurance. We need citation forgiveness. We need to make sure that we can get them job interviews. And of course, they're not going to say, well, they can fix their own cars. Yeah, but we need parts. Can we go to the junkyard? All the stuff that you tool off the community, can we get parts to fix the car to make it operational, make it safe? So they can pass safety check, get a license, and you can go ahead and help them with this forgiveness component to get them whole, where they can go back and become productive. And of course, they said no. There was all this alawai dance where they make excuses why no can. And for us, it was all about how can rather than no can. And there were several directives there are several rules where if you had a split in the family where the husband was part of the family, but the only way you could get care was that he had to be kicked out of the family for violence, for whatever. And there were families there that were together, and the only way they could get help is that if he was kicked out. So it was never a solution for healing, it was always a solution for separation and making it government palatable for their way of solving problems, and their way is punishment.
So, looking back, because you've mentioned the issue of healing several times so far, um, how has your activism impacted your health and your well-being? And let's talk a little bit about Leandra as well.
Health is one of the big issues. Like I said, many of the homeless, the Hawaiians that went there, they went there to die, because in society there's no place that allows healing. And even today, where do Hawaiian men go to find peace? Where do Hawaiian women go to find peace? The women tend to heal by being together. Guys tend to be more solitary in many ways, and they're not going to ask for help. So a lot of it is they go to a place that's quiet, peaceful, and work on just sort of trying to find their own peace. And even now, you look for homeless men, a lot of trouble, because there's no real understanding of how to navigate the healing process. We were never brought up that way.
What about other political activists? Do you work with others? Is that part of your healing also?
Oh, yeah. And at the beginning, we felt we were alone, battling the state, battling the military. And then it was really overwhelming, that feeling that you're alone and this whole world of government and mass against you. So the weight was really extreme on all of us. And the pressure of being homeless or receiving assistance, going out with the pad to go to the store and pull off money so everybody can see that you're not supporting yourself, and the only way you can feed your kids is with this ticket that gives you money, and these guys are getting food for free and stuff like that. It was very painful, emotionally painful. So I'm sure it has an effect mental health, but also on the ability to how am I treating others when I'm feeling like shit? And I'm sure there was a lot of times that I didn't behave well. But this is all part of the learning, I found. And being forced into environment. So Leandra smoked. So she ended up dying of cancer. And she said, I paid a lot for this disease. That was her realization. And even though we were there to heal our relationship, which we did, and then I think as a couple, we became more potent in the movement because we were together.
So do you think that the healing of your relationship together came about because of the experiences that you had when you were actually trying to push back against what didn't work?
Yeah. And it provided a lot of enforcement, because now there's this experience of almost jumping off a cliff because you don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea what direction. There is no plan. There is no expectation of success. So was it going to be failure? Was it going to be jail, death, whatever? We didn't know. And challenging the state, the government, and I really appreciate Caetano, because I didn't like him. He didn't like us. So the feeling was mutual. And apparently we raised enough hell that created issues for him. And I was okay with that. And I'm not sure if I answered that question completely, but
good enough.
Yeah.
So, I know you've been around, you've been involved in lots of different activities. Is there any one particular event that you're especially happy that you were part of?
Well, there's many, if I look back.
Well, pick one or two.
Part of the issue with Malama Makua is that eventually the military became more prominent in this whole picture of access, denying access to cultural resources, And part of it was when Israel was, his ashes were scattered in Makua. I mean, traffic was backed up for miles I think from Barber's Point all the way to Kaena and back. That's how many people were on the road. But we had a lot of people on the beach. And I was videotaping that for Israel's wife. So I don't have any footage of it other than I gave all of it to them. So I have some stills of the event. But we found out 2 weeks after that the Marines, 8,000 Marines, is going to come to Hawaii to do an amphibious landing in Makua. So we got the Makaha guys together, the canoe paddlers, the surfers, us. We all met on the beach and we were able to stop them. They still came in with helicopters, but they didn't do an amphibious landing. They went to Waimanalo to do that. Now, what we found out during that time, we started looking at the graves that is in Makua, and all of them got bullet holes because as they would go up Mauka, they would be firing at the enemy, hiding behind the headstone.
That's a practice? That was part of a practice?
That was, well, if you're training, you're anticipating the enemy to be hiding behind something. So you're going to shoot at something to try and excite them enough to move, and then you can shoot them for real.
So back in the day, there were no restrictions about anything, including the cemetery?
Well, one of the stories that we got was there was a church there, the Makua Church, but also housing of all the people that the Hawaiians had Kuleana land assignment. So they had homes there. And one of the training scenarios after the war started is that the military put crosses on all the roofs, and their instruction to the pilots was, these are places we don't want you to touch. And some of the pilots didn't get the email. And after it was all done, all of those were blown up. And when they went back and landed, they said, what the hell you do? Well, we thought they were targets. So we took them all out. And this is part of the oppressive colonialism that comes in, and how you eliminate a people, eliminate their house, their language, their access to resources. And so these are the little things that we started learning about the behavior. And even going to court, when we actually went through the evictions and got arrested, going to court, they put a Hawaiian judge in charge that was very American. And he says, you guys can do anything you like, but you cannot do that in my court. You guys broke the law. How do we break the law? We're trying to be Hawaiians. You obstructed a government operation. And then we told them, yeah, but this is a Kuleana land where we were, Leandra was. And the Kamaka gave us permission to be there. The county had gone through, the state had gone through and surveyed all of the properties, Kuleana lands and Makua, and even showed a map where Kamaka's property came out and Leandra's tent and her stuff was there, all mapped out within the Kuleana. And we told him that, and he said, well, where's the DLNR guy? Call him up. And he said, was her place on that property? And he lies in court. And the judge says, he's an official of the state. I gotta believe him. So this is how Hawaiians have been set up for decades, actually over a century. It's manipulated, it's legislated into criminality, and then you go there and then you're actually punished because that's how the law is written.
You are still politically active, even after all of this stuff, and what you're telling us that the system is absolutely against us, but you're still doing it. How come?
Well, I believe in planting seeds, and Malama does 2 accesses a month.
Well, first tell us about Malama Makua, because you didn't touch on Malama Makua at all.
Okay, well, let me finish this one part, because in educating, planting seeds, we've had colonels, generals coming down, and one general that came in, and It was like a week after a big burn, and this guy wants to introduce the new commander for the 25th. So I shake his hand. I said, "Wow, it's great. I'm glad you're here. You're brand new, and you already burnt the place." They quickly left. I mean, so the education component, and also other colonels, and this is Hawaiian land. You got the guns, so you're forcing us out, but this is not yours. Because they would always say, "This is our land." No, this is not your land. This is our land. So telling them that, this constant reminder, whether it's the cops, the state, the county, neighborhood board, we have to keep on repeating and getting them to hear the message no matter what. So Malama Makua was it was born out of the homeless Malama Makua Council. And then also Fred Dodge and a bunch of peace activists had what they called Malama Makua. So we merged at the front gate of Makua because there was Hawaiian issues that were not being addressed, and there were peace and justice issues not being addressed. So at the gate is where we met and collaborated with the protests, and also realized that there was no separation between Hawaiian cultural access or access to resources or justice, and there was no peace. So the peace and justice and Hawaiian issues merged. And Makua is the one that brought us together. So like I said, Kanaiki was the part where we would challenge and learn about ourselves, and Makua was the nurturing one. And from that point on, we constantly started doing things. And part of it, we wanted access inside the gate. And at first, the military greeted us at the gate with their MPs, M16s, flak jacket, their helmets, sidearms, and challenged us every single time. Now, this is over 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But our constant efforts and reminding them about who they are, and they're the illegal occupiers of an illegal overthrow, has changed to the point where they're more inviting. And within that, there's a little bit of danger. But as long as we remain solid in what we believe.
So what caused the military to? How'd you get in? How'd you get in the door?
Sued them in federal court. And how that happened is that 10 years before Malama Makua, there was like 250 fires in Makua. Some of them small, some of them massive that burnt the entire valley. And at first, Leandra and I went to Sierra Club Legal Defense looking for help for the homeless. And Sierra Club said, "Sorry, we cannot help. We deal with endangered species." Yeah, but Hawaiian people are endangered species. They said, no, we can't do that. So it brought our attention to the point where maybe we need to start looking at the Hawaiian without a voice, the endangered species, as part of that path to getting peace and justice, getting access to resources. So it went from Sierra Club to Earth Justice. And then we were able to convince Earth Justice to represent us on a lawsuit. They sent a letter to the military because of all the fires, and that was where we started. And then 2 weeks after the letter went in, we may be suing you guys, the Marine Corps went in to train. They lobbed the mortar outside the fire break road, started burning. 5 o'clock, we got to go home. They packed up and left. Nobody was fighting the fire, which is burning out of control. And then the fire burned for 3 days, burnt the entire Kahanaiki side over into Makua side. Back then, we wanted them to stop training so we didn't have fires. And my attitude was that, let them train. Every time they train, they're going to burn. Every time they burn, we got cameras. Every time they get cameras, there was one fire that we were able to capture a pueo escaping the fire. So when we went back to them, said, well, the pueos are ground nesters. They need protection because they're endangered, especially on Oahu. And they said, yeah, but they're raptors. They can pick up and leave. The adult can leave, but the keikis are dying. They're getting cooked. and then their habitat is being destroyed. So all these little lessons that we learned along the way, learning about government, the laws, and then endangered species and critical habitat, that all came along the way because we didn't know any of that stuff. And as we started learning, and then we did the lawsuit, 9/11 happened. And we had less than 24 hours to come up with an agreement because they were going to go back for federal court. And we knew that if they went to court, they would force the judge to allow them to go back training. So we forced them into an agreement. You can train for, so many times a year for 2 years. And after that, you got to finish the EIS. And during that time, and a lot of people got pissed because we negotiated with them. But part of the negotiation was that you cannot go back training until you finish the EIS. It's been, this coming year is 20 years of peace for Makua. No live fire.
No EIS.
No EIS. Well, they said they finished the EIS, but they never published. Because what happened is that what I found, and I learned this from Marion Kelly's report. She did a report, but they wouldn't publish. She was able to publish it. And I don't know if it was illegal, but she did anyway. So this is the courage of academics who do things, but also politics that the government, because the federal government funds so much of the state really resists. So Department of Health, EPA, these guys get all of their, not all, but a significant amount of funding so they behave, so they don't rock the boat. And for us, we wasn't looking at behaving. So when they started burning, they burned through endangered species, wiped out tons of Hawaiian species that can never be replaced. But there was never a value put on any of the loss. And during that big fire, we went up to the Hea Ukanipo, and all the stones were like emu stones, or like volcanic stones. They were all rainbow because it was so hot. And part of that heat came from the 7 years of no fire in that one spot. So the plants would grow, die back, and it became a fuel load that extremely hot. But all of these were alien species imported on the boots of the soldiers that went there to train.
How is your health? How are you feeling?
Well, I just finished a triple bypass, so I'm still breathing. I think I'm okay.
Better question. How is your energy?
Some days good, some days not so good. So still recovering from the operation. Some days a little bit unstable.
You're still politically involved. Yes.
Oh yeah, I comment every day on Facebook. Illegal overthrow. And there was one today I posted, show me the treaty. Oh yeah, no can, cause no more. That was my response. And I think that constant repetition is needed. So even Hawaiians who are very American will constantly hear it, and eventually they're going to hear it. One of the things that came out of Makua was Noi Noi Silver. We had a lot of, the Kikuni would come out, Bumpy guys would come out. We had people, Skippy guys from the Big Island, Chief Tayama. These were really frontline activists that arrest wasn't a threat. And Noi Noi Silva came out with Xerox copies of the anti-annexation petitions. When she was just doing research, she said, I just came back from the Library of Congress, and this is what I found. And you could see the watermarks, and this is the old mimeograph kind paper. So we never knew. And then as they started refining the paperwork, the Hawaiian attorneys were very American. When they seen their ancestor's name, even for me, when my great-grandmother's signature was there, what is my kuleana? What's my responsibility? I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, Portuguese, so my Hawaiian is not that big. But Sam Lono said, all it takes is a drop. You cannot escape your Hawaiian responsibility. So that asks the question to both me and Leandro, what's our kuleana? What's our responsibility to our kupuna? Because back then I was really angry at my kupuna for not doing anything to prevent this unjust attack on homeless Hawaiians, or the denial from accessing Hawaiian resources, or the specifically at that time, the beach. So I didn't know that my kupuna signed the anti-annexation petition. They were involved politically, so that removed some of the fear that I had. I was still really fearful, not knowing what was going to happen. They're going to come in. And we even had one guy, the governor said, this Filipino guy, got the Bible and one machete. And it was almost like the white stone and the black stone. Choose, which one you like, peace or death? He's the one that offered us land on the Big Island. But this is how politics were influencing and threatening community members. If you get threatened, you're going to back off. Say, what you going to do? I've been to Vietnam. What you going to do? Kill me? Go for it. It's a good day to die.
Obviously, health issues.
Health issues. But I mean, part of it is that mental health, the physical health, the emotional health, and all of those things had a chance to move. And because emotionally, going through a separation or a divorce is traumatic. The physical part wasn't so much physical, other than I was in an accident. So what caused our separation, my accident, it affected my neck and my back. So if I stood up too long or sat up too long, I would get extreme, like somebody was poking me in the back with an ice pick, so I had to lay down. So work started suffering, income started suffering. Anyway, it affected the relationship in a negative way.
But at the end, it was all good?
Well, I started carrying a camera. Camera became my weapon of choice.
Both of you.
And because I can shoot all day and nobody can shoot back, you can lie to me all you like, and I'm going to keep rolling. And what happens is that we did that several times. I started doing neighborhood board meetings, got my daughter to take over because I was able to get the neighborhood board to pay the kids for doing that. And initially, when I went in with my camera, and Leandro would do the microphone, and she would do that in the front seat, and neighborhood board was so contentious. And they would say, if they got into an argument, meet me in a parking lot, they'll go in the parking lot and start fighting. So with my camera, when it started forcing them to behave, but the first time I was in, they threatened to have me arrested. And my response to them was that, you know what, the lieutenant is outside. You like me, call him. So I wasn't going to bow to them saying, this is a public meeting, I'm recording, and it's all going to go on. So you guys want to be stupid? I didn't say that part, but I did tell him, let me call the cop. He's right outside. We can do this right now.
Sounds like no fear, which comes at some point and indicates kind of like a healthy attitude. We're going to wrap it up. You have any
the last thing is fear. And Pui, Pao, and Joan helped me with that because they came to Makua while we were going through all of this learning, and they videotaped us. I was so afraid of being in front of the camera or my voice being in front of a mic. They got me to do an interview on the papa that's right out front of Makua. And my legs were in the hole, one of the indentation, the holes. I was sitting down. My back was to the ocean, and the camera and the mic was right there. My hands were sweating, dripping with panic. My legs were like jello. The world was kind of spinning. And what helped me was that I was so pissed at Cayetano that anger helped move me through that fear and willing to be recorded. And from that point on, I found that a lot of our resistance in the community is our fear of being heard, seen, and sharing our pain, whatever that is. I don't like what do you call that? A legislator or a council person. I would not say anything. Now, I'm going to ask hard questions.
All right. Thank you very much.